Buying versus renting a home. It's Money Monday with the University of Michigan Credit Union on the Lucy Ann Lance Show, Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLBY. This is such a great topic right now because it is swinging into spring, and that usually is a really good time to start looking at buying a home, or maybe you just want to rethink your rent. No doubt that buying a home is a major life decision, but is it right for you? There are pros and cons to both renting and buying. So we're going to sort all of that out today for you, especially if you're on the fence. You're not alone. And we're going to learn more from the financial education manager at UMCU. He is Mark Munzenberger joining us again. And I love this topic because I, for some reason, have had a lot of young people, Mark, asking me this very question right now.
We've talked about in the past, Lucianne, one of my most popular workshops that I do, both virtually and in person for members and members of the community, is the First Time Homebuyers Education Workshop, where people just learn so much about everything that goes into buying their first home. But I always usually do an exercise or an activity with the group when we talk a little bit about, the pros and cons of both renting and buying, so we can approach this in somewhat of a more of a neutral sort of status and not thinking that it's a one size fits all approach. We've got to kind of look at all these factors.
Yeah, very good point. And Mark, I want to ask you about your homebuyer education workshop. I know oftentimes some people, depending on their financial situation, must attend one of these. Does this count towards that?
It doesn't. Usually those are offered through either HUD or the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, which is in Lansing. Honestly, Lucianne, those are typically 8-hour courses. Mine is a half day, and so it's more of an educational process. That's everything. So you don't get a certificate to use towards closing costs in mine. It's still a great start to get yourself, educated about the process.
And yours is open to anyone who would like to attend.
Anyone at all. And I usually do at least once or twice a month.
Oh, very good. All right, so let's start with renting. What are the pros and cons of renting a place?
Well, renters sometimes, especially if they've sort of fallen into, they get a little anxious about renting so much. And I always say, listen, remember, this is a huge financial commitment. So let's really consider some of the advantages to renting so we understand, it's not a bad decision. First of all, you've got that mobility and freedom to move around. Usually when we get into a lease, it's typically about 1 year. And once that 1 year lease is up, you're under no obligation to stay. You don't have to get the next tenant. You don't have to sell the property or anything. It gives you some flexibility. And it also allows you to test out certain communities. Ann Arbor, Saline, Ypsilanti. You're interested in buying a house, but you haven't lived there before. Renting is a good place to start.
I hadn't thought about renting in that vein. That's a very good point. The other interesting aspect of this, you really don't have to worry about a lot of the maintenance when you're renting, right?
Oh, that is huge. When we're talking about the upkeep and then even sometimes sudden repairs, I know you as a homeowner, occasionally it happens, and myself as well. When you're renting, you rely on the property manager or the landlord to take care of those maintenance responsibilities. That's a major financial aspect that you should consider.
There also is not a down payment. There might be a security deposit, but not that big down payment if you're renting.
Exactly. I mean, sure, maybe a 1 month rent is typically required, $1,000 or $1,500, nowhere near what's required on a home buy. When you're talking a 5 to 10% down payment, that's a major step, a financial hurdle for homeowners. So that's a definitely advantage of renting. Easier to get into the property. And then if we talk overall, if we just kind of compare overall finances, usually renting is less expensive. Less utilities, less property taxes, less maintenance costs. So financially, it might fit your budget at this time better than a mortgage.
Well, that may be true, but then again, rent is really high. And sometimes you're paying more per month for rent than you are or would be for a mortgage.
It could be. And boy, folks get frustrated sometimes when the lease goes up. They didn't plan on moving and all of a sudden their lease just went up by 5 or 7 or 10%. It's frustrating, but I think what we have to do, Lucianne, is understand it's not necessarily just the monthly payment. It's everything else associated. It could be the maintenance and the longer commute to work and stuff like that. So that's why we want to look at other things other than just the monthly payment.
Now, one more pro on your list here, Mark.
Well, there are some fantastic communities in the area. Swimming pools, walking trails, fitness centers, tennis courts. I've seen all sorts of them. And as renters, we tend to get used to that, maybe even covered parking and those type of things. So, there's a lot of people that settle into the renting lifestyle and they really love it for a lot of these reasons.
Yeah, you get a lot of amenities, but you're going to pay for those as well in terms
Absolutely.
of how much your
Yep.
lease is per month. We're talking with Mark Munzenberger. He is the financial education manager at University of Michigan Credit Union. You can also visit umcu.org and get information about his home buyer education workshops that he gives about twice a month. Now, let's talk about the cons of renting. What is the big problem with renting generally?
I would say usually when we start, especially, potentially for potentially a younger person, it's that sense that they're not building any wealth or equity. They're making these payments, they've got a roof over their head, but they're not really building anything. They don't own anything, and they're just sort of paying just for that dwelling. And we all know that real estate can be an asset, especially as we get a little bit older. We can, use that later in life. So, there's absolutely a financial aspect to that where, how great would it be when we're getting close to retirement to have a home that's paid in full and we're able to live there for as long as we like. So that, from a financial standpoint, something that we should look at.
All right. When you rent, you're not always allowed to make a lot of changes in your place, are you?
And that's it for those creative folks and those people that really like to customize their place. Usually for rental properties, it's very limited as what you can do in terms of, painting and customizing it and that type of thing. And along those lines, for those that are living in a shared community, there could be some privacy issues. You're sharing a wall, you're sharing a community with other people. And for those that, tend to like it a little quieter and those type of things, that could be something that you're really looking to maybe have a little space of your own.
All right. And you mentioned earlier rent could go up from one lease to another. That's another con to renting. And then, of course, there's just space issues, right?
Most of the time with a house, you're going to get more space because oftentimes you'll have a garage, a basement, an attic, some of those extra closet space. For folks, and I hear this all the time, we need more space, whether that's because we've had an addition to our family, those type of things. You'll almost always get that with a home. Apartments are a little tighter in that area.
Unless you're renting a house, but that costs a great deal of money usually.
It can, absolutely. I mean, depending on the community and those type of things, our homes that are up for sale, but in general, those tend to be more expensive than renting, let's just say, a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment.
Good point. All right, now the buying pros and cons. Let's start with the pros of buying a home, Mark.
Well, and that's where everybody comes to my workshop and they're all excited and they all there for a couple different reasons. First of all, financially, they want to build equity. They want to build as they're paying each month, they want to feel that the home is theirs. So that's a big part of their goals. The good news is, and especially the last couple of years, we've experienced that home values do tend to increase. Now, no guarantees. We don't have a crystal ball here, but sometimes you'll see home values increase 10 to 15%. You've really done nothing except cut the grass, and those values are going up. So you're building wealth a little bit. And remember, we talked about customization.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's the beauty of owning a home. If you want to paint those walls, bright purple, you can go ahead and paint those walls bright purple because it's yours. You really can customize it based on your values and likes.
On the other hand, you have to remember that customization is going to cost more money.
Overall, both, I always teach there's going to be routine maintenance, like, landscaping and those type of things. And then there's going to be those unexpected repairs like plumbing, electrical, and you got to be prepared for both. So in general, you're going to see higher maintenance costs as a homeowner.
All right. And there is a tax savings in owning a home.
If you itemize your taxes, the interest you pay on your mortgage is a tax deduction. So that's a good thing, depending on if you fall into that bucket. Absolutely still something to look into. So that could save you some money at tax time.
All right. And then the cons of owning a home.
Well, again, let's go back to finances. And I always have to, sort of be that person that says, we have to make sure that we're patient when we're going through this process. Buying a home is usually the largest purchase we're ever going to make. So we've got to make sure it fits our budget, that everything lines up. We never want to rush into this situation. So we've got to make sure the finances are lining up, both the mortgage payment plus the maintenance.
All right. And you talked about a home value increasing, but sometimes it actually goes the opposite direction. It all depends on the market.
It could. And boy, I don't want to turn back the clock too much, but back in 2008, 2009, we saw some homes in some communities, dropping by 20 to 25%. And it took years for the homes to come back. So similar to the stock market, home values do tend to fluctuate a little bit. We've been in an uptick in the last couple years, but in the future, we may see those values come down a little bit, which means at times we have less flexibility. If we ever do need to move, we're sort of at the mercy of the market.
Ooh, that's a good point. Hopefully you
So-
don't have to move at a time when that home value is down.
Exactly, and that's going to impact any profits you make on that home, for sure.
All
Great
right.
point. Yep.
Mark, tell everyone again about your home buyer education workshops at University of Michigan Credit Union.
Sure. It is offered. We are right now, I'm still doing them virtually, starting in the spring of 2022, going into the summer. We're going to offer them both virtually and in person at our branches here in the Ann Arbor area. Anyone's welcome. It's really perfect for those individuals that have never gone through this process before. I call it a first-time home buyers class. Folks can sign up on our website. I usually do 2 times a month. Workshops are 2 to 3 hours in duration, so you got to stick with me a little bit. Lots of information, but you will leave much more empowered about how this process works.
And that's what it's all about, having that power to make the right decisions for you and your family. Mark Mutzenberger can help get you there. Go online to umcu.org for more information about the home buyer workshops at University of Michigan Credit Union. That's umcu.org. I'm Lucy Ann Lance. This is Ann Arbor's Talk Station 1290 WLBY.